Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. Thank you for the recommendation, Paul and Deja. My rule is if I have two people who recommend the same book to me, I've got to read it. So here we are. Violet Sorrengail was supposed to be a scribe, but because of a domineering general who also happens to be her mother, she finds herself in a squadron of dragon riders, and she has to survive this first year where lots of these first-year people die. This book has very strong strengths and obvious weaknesses. I'll start with the strengths. So first of all, the premise is brilliant. You have the bookish girl trying to survive in an extremely dangerous environment. It pulls you in right away. Also, I think the writing goes in this book's favor. What you want to do as a writer is to have a sentence and a paragraph doing multiple things at once. So for example, this book starts off with Violet having to cross this narrow bridge that leads to where the school is, and people are falling off, and it's very dangerous, and she's trying to figure out how she can get across and stay alive. That's the opening scene. Now what you want to do when you're writing this scene is to convey settings, plot, and character, and you want to do them all at once, because a novice writer would talk about Violet as this bookish girl and wanting to be a scribe, and then you get a sense of her character, and then they would talk about the setting and the history and the geography of the land and the alliances between the different countries. And then you would get onto the actual part where she's walking and isn't it slippery and all that suspense of the scene. What she does very cleverly, what the writer does very cleverly in this book, is she has Violet scared walking across it, and as a coping mechanism, as a way to keep her focused, because she knows if she doesn't focus, she's going to fall off the edge, she starts saying out loud things that she studied as a scribe, about details about the land, details about dragons, and all these things that will come into play later. The author here is very good at weaving story, plot, and character, those three, throughout the story. The author does this to great effect in the book because the story keeps moving and you don't feel like you're missing out on information as you go. I was also impressed with the writer and how well she does action. Action is a tricky thing in a book because the more action there is, the more things that are happening, the more things that you need to describe. But the more you describe, the more you have to read, and that slows things down. It's a catch-22. She does it just right in some of these dragon battles that are they're very action-packed, but she uses just the right amount of description to keep it flowing and exciting. I also have to give a compliment to her world-building skills. I think it's an amazing what she set up here with the dragons, the school, the different nations. It's very well done. It's a world where you kind of want to hear the stories that come out of it. With all of that being said, what are the downsides of the book? I can sum it up very quickly. This is a book of raging teenage hormones. There's a lot of sex and vulgarity in this book, and I think it does a disservice to all the other great things that she set up here in the story. So if you were to put the main character in a pie chart, a quarter of her would be nerdiness, a love of books and intelligence. A quarter of her would be a don't tell me what I can't do sort of tough girl attitude. And then the other half of the pie would be an extreme amount of lust for Xaden, her squad leader. Over and over in this book, we hear a physical description of Xaden. His hair is perfectly placed. His muscles are perfectly toned. He gives her a look that makes her go weak in the knees, and on and on and on. She writes this as if the reader has short-term memory loss and needs constant reminding of what Xaden looks like and how incredibly, incredibly attractive he is. He is a Greek god sculpted out of marble, and he is every teenage girl's romantic fantasy times 1,000. Like, we get the idea. I can't think of the last time I read a book and felt so beaten over the head with a single point. The audio version of this book is 21 hours, and several of those hours we're getting a physical description of this 23-year-old man and how he makes her feel. It gets old fast. So to be clear, this is not a love story, this is a lust story, and unfortunately it's a central part of the book. Personally, I can't feel invested in a character where their biological urges overpower everything else. It comes across to me as cheap and pandering to a certain demographic, And at no point in the book did I care about who Violet did or did not hook up with. Whatever. I also thought the villains of the story were good, except we didn't really see much of them until the very end. My suggestion would be to replace all the sexual longing dialogue with some villain build-up. I could have seen myself giving this 5 stars. As it stands, though, I feel overall cheated by this book. When thinking about whether I should read the sequel, I'm kind of curious how some of it is going to develop, because they do have some good plot twists at the end, but I have a horrible sense that we're just going to hear more about Xaden and all of that. So I think I'm going to pass on the sequel and give this book 3 stars.